Sam, I'll start with you. I say this all the time. I have no interest in palace intrigue. I don't want to hear who doesn't get along with who. I don't want to hear the gossip. That's fine. It's great for Game of Thrones, but not for the federal government. When we're looking at this sort of incoming administration, what kinds of people? We see the famous folks at the top, right? But where are the lower level bureaucrats coming from? Are they all coming from right-wing organizations? Is there a list floating out there from, the Federalist Society like they do with judges? Where are the new coming administrators coming from besides TV?
Sure. Well, first of all, I kind of believe you on palace intrigue. We like a little bit of the juice too. Who doesn't like a little bit of that juice? Come on. As for the staffing of this administration, look, I mean, some of this has been people who've worked in conservative politics and on Project 2025. We've seen it in the hires. Some of this is people who are on TV because Trump watches a fair amount of TV, more than the average person, and is enamored with people who appear on Fox News. But what we've seen, which is kind of interesting recently, is that some of the people who are being staffed are from these secondary advisors to Trump who want to bring their people into his orbit. So to a degree, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for instance, has tried to hire a bunch of his allies who are unorthodox, to say the least, to staff positions, not just at HHS, but at the CIA. That has not completely gone over well with people in the Trump orbit. That's caused a bit of friction. The most recent friction, though, has been with Elon Musk and people of the sort of tech bro, MAGA circuit who are coming in to do things like staff an AI council, for instance. And what we've seen over the weekend is a real clash of culture, which is that the people in the tech world, Silicon Valley, have an incredibly different view of immigration policy, for instance, than what I would call sort of the traditional MAGA sect, which is very much opposed to any forms of immigration, including legal immigration. And so we've had this very animated, quite personalized argument online all weekend over H-1B visas, which has pitted Elon Musk and his allies against sort of the traditional MAGA type. And so when you ask the question, where are these people coming from? The answer is a bunch of different places, and it's kind of combustible at the moment.
So here's the other question that sort of I'm struck with. We know that part of Project 2025 is a massive, massive reduction of the federal workforce, like just firing tons of people and then rehiring people based on them being loyalists one way or another. I've got to ask, because this seems very strange to me, when you're going to massively fire people, and we're not just talking about, the fun things like the FDA that everybody knows about. We're talking about smaller organizations that run everything from NASA to clean water and everything else like that. I've got to ask our other guests, where are people going to be hired from after that? Because it seems very clear that this new administration is interested in wiping the slate clean with a lot of federal employees.
Well, I think it's an open question of how sweeping some of those firings will be. As you know, there are federal laws that protect federal workers, and I imagine there's going to be some significant challenges to those. As we've seen, Elon Musk and others are trying different approaches to maybe remove workers from maybe on their own account. They've talked about requiring workers to come back into the office 5 days a week, no remote work, and seeing if that will just get people to quit. One thing I will say, though, is Sam has obviously done a lot of reporting on some of these different factions coming in. The sort of traditional GOP person around D.C., however, is much more interested in working for the Trump administration this second time around. The first time around, they couldn't fill any vacancies they had. It was a government with holes all over the place, and that's not going to be the case here. If there are holes, it's because they are applying really strict standards to who they will allow in. They want to see, were you critical of him, not just in 2015, 2016, were you critical of him after January 6th? And if you were, you're not going to find a job. It was not really socially acceptable in the first term for a lot of people to go into the administration. This time around, I don't think any Republican in good standing really has trouble going to work for Donald Trump. So I don't think there's going to be a shortage of people, and some of them will just be your sort of traditional GOPers who the first time around said, I don't think so, but this time they feel differently.
Someone will follow up with that question. So the idea of being stained by an administration obviously is very different when that administration comes back. and by a small margin wins the popular vote. But you still have some of these nominees that are met with a tremendous amount of scrutiny. You've got people who are concerned about Kash Patel. You have people who are concerned about Tulsi Gabbard. Where do you think the administration, the incoming administration, is going to find their national security people? Because many of those who have the most experience don't want to be any part of not just this administration, but certainly don't want to work for either of those particular individuals.
Right. But I would say this to that question. There's two types of factions within the national security apparatus that Donald Trump is putting together. Yes, the Tulsi Gabbard wing may have difficulty finding sort of traditional-minded Republicans who are for a more forceful and active international engagement. But on the flip side, Marco Rubio is set to be the Secretary of State, and he has a fairly robust record in almost a completely different ideological direction from Tulsi Gabbard. And so, yeah, you might have self-ideological sorting that happens within the administration. But again, this gets back to this kind of weird combination of forces that Trump has put under the MAGA tent. You have people who are sympathetic to Bashar al-Assad and people who want to completely isolate him. And now, of course, it's a moot point since he's fled and gone to Russia. But that's my point, is that you have two very different ideological factions here. How they work together, how those factions come together, and who sets the tone for policy remains to be seen, because at the heart of it, I think the issue is, will Trump be the axis around everything, around which everything rotates, or will Elon Musk, to a degree, and we've seen it a little bit already, will he set the pace for the administration? So even at the top, you're starting to see a little bit of incongruity.
Brendan, I want to play you some sound from the newly appointed border czar on his thoughts about family separation. Get your thoughts on the other side.
Look, family detention, if we bring it back, it's on the table. We haven't finished the plan yet. If you choose to have a child here in the United States while you know you're here illegally and you know you're on a court order to deport, that's on you.
Brendan, this is obviously, it was controversial policy before. It'll be controversial policy now. You mix this with a push to massively remove large numbers of people. How do you think this plays out if they don't have a genius running this sort of border and immigration program?
Well, first of all, I'm astounded that Tom Homan is out there sort of doing these interviews and saying all of these things, because every time he does it, he just creates controversy. Look, I think the big question here is, how much leash does Tom have here? Is he out here kind of running a little fiefdom where he can call all the shots that he wants? Or are there some people in the administration who realize that some of the stuff he's talking about is going to be really unpopular? And that's not theoretical. We know that from the first time around, a lot of the approaches they did with family separation and others were really unpopular. And Donald Trump probably recognizes that. He took a big hit from those things. And now I have no doubt that they are going to be very aggressive in enforcement actions. But they're also, at least Donald Trump, aware to the politics of the situation. And so I'm just curious whether Tom Homan has the free rein and seems at this moment that nobody is really keeping him in check, because it's not just like what you do, it's how you do it that is ultimately going to determine the politics. I think border enforcement, border control and immigration enforcement is popular. Separating families is not, and that's the big question.
Sam Stein and Brendan Buck, thank you both for starting us off tonight. Really appreciate it. Coming up, the people Trump wants in his second administration and what they might do in handling another pandemic. That's next on All In.
If you have heart disease and struggle with LDL-C,
even with statins and diet,
listen to your heart.
Talk to your doctor about Repatha.
Repatha plus a statin lowers LDL-C by 63%. Do not take Repatha if you're allergic to it. Serious allergic reactions can occur. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Common side effects include runny nose, sore throat, common cold symptoms, flu or flu-like symptoms, back pain, high blood sugar, and redness, pain, or bruising at the injection site. Ask about Repatha.
At More Furniture, we're starting the new year with freedom of choice. Choose from the widest variety of styles and colors for every room in your home. With cozy sofas, elegant dining sets, and stylish bedrooms, we've got everything you need to create your dream home. Plus, during this holiday weekend, you'll get our very best offer. Pay no interest until 2026. Get free white glove delivery, and we'll pay your sales tax. Hurry into More Furniture this New Year's weekend for the best selection.
Each week on my podcast, I'm joined by uniquely qualified guests who help me take a big picture look at the issues, like Representative Jasmine Crockett, late night host Seth Meyers, former Attorney General Eric Holder, and many more. Why is this happening? Listen now.
MSNBC Premium gives you early access and ad-free listening to Rachel Maddow's chart-topping series, MSNBC Original Podcasts, exclusive bonus content, and all of your favorite MSNBC shows now ad-free. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Is if we don't have enough to worry about during this cold flu COVID season, is worrying news about bird flu. CDC says the virus now shows new mutations that may make it easier for the infection to be spread from person to person. And that increases the risk of a wider outbreak of bird flu, or even potentially a pandemic. The concerns over bird flu are rising just as we are on the verge of Senate confirmation hearings for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services, which could begin in the first or second week of January. Kennedy's anti-vaccine stances are well known and deeply troubling for someone who would run the federal agency responsible for protecting the health and well-being of all people living in the United States. But it's not just Kennedy who is a concern. It's the people he would bring on board with him, like a raw milk producer in California whose products have been recalled due to bird flu contamination. This guy says Kennedy's team has asked him to lead the nation's policy on raw milk.